All right, so you know how we're always talking about hidden dangers and stuff?
Uh-huh.
Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into something that's probably lurking right in your own bathroom, like literally in your shower head.
Yeah, you might not even realize it's there,
Exactly. It's this bacteria called Legionella.
and it can cause some pretty serious illnesses. Like, have you heard of Legionnaire's disease?
Oh, yeah, that sounds scary.
It's basically severe type of pneumonia. And you know what else is kind of crazy?
What's that?
The number of cases in the U.S. has been going up.
Really?
Yeah, and this new research we're looking at from Clemens and Crank, they actually suggest that the real numbers might be even higher than what's being reported.
Wow. So, like, there could be way more people getting sick from this than we even know.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand this bacteria and what we can do to protect ourselves.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. What exactly did this research look at?
Well, they used a model to simulate how Legionella grows in home plumbing systems.
So, like a virtual plumbing system.
Yeah, basically. And they found that one of the biggest factors influencing growth was the age of the water.
Water age, so like how long it sits in the pipes?
Exactly. And the longer it sits, the more time those bacteria have to multiply.
That makes sense. Stagnant water is never a good thing.
Nope, not at all. So they modeled a typical Dutch home for this study.
Like with showers and sinks and all that.
Yep, all the usual stuff. And get this, they even used real-world water usage patterns to make the simulation super realistic.
So they weren't just guessing about how often people shower or flush or anything?
Nope, they wanted to be as accurate as possible. And you know what they found?
What?
Even if you start with a super low concentration of Legionella, like the kind that most tests wouldn't even pick up,
Really?
yeah, it can multiply like crazy in stagnant water.
So even if our water looks clean, it could still be harboring this bacteria.
Yep, it's kind of a silent threat.
That's unsettling. And they specifically focused on showers as the main source of exposure, right?
Yes, because that's how we're most likely to inhale the bacteria.
Mm.
You know, all those tiny water droplets we breathe in when we shower.
Okay, now that's kind of freaking me out. I thought showers were supposed to be like the one place we don't have to worry about water quality.
Unfortunately, that's not always the case, and the research shows that the risk of getting sick increases as that water age goes up.
So like the longer the water sits there, the worse it gets.
Exactly, and they looked at the risk of both Pontiac fever, which is the milder flu-like illness,
Right.
and the more serious one, Legionnaire's disease.
So if I go on vacation for a week and come back to a stagnant shower, that's not a good thing.
Not ideal. No, they actually calculated what they call a critical water age.
Critical water age.
Yeah, that's the point at which the risk of Legionnaire's disease significantly increases.
Okay, and what is that? Like how many days are we talking?
Well, for Legionnaire's, it's just 6 days of stagnant water.
6 days. Wow, I'm definitely going to have to rethink my post-vacation shower routine now. But what about people who live in larger households? Wouldn't more people using the water actually mean more chances for contamination?
You'd think so, right, but it's actually the opposite.
Really? How come?
Because more people means more frequent water use, so the water is constantly flowing and doesn't have as much chance to become stagnant.
So you're actually safer living with roommates than living alone when it comes to Legionella.
Basically, yeah. It's
Oh.
kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it.
It does. So flushing our pipes regularly is key here.
Absolutely. The research looked at 2 types of purging. One is scheduled, where you flush at set intervals, like every 12 or 24 hours.
Okay.
And the other is smart purging, which only activates after a certain period of non-use.
So like it knows when the water's been sitting there too long?
Exactly.
That sounds way more efficient, especially for people trying to conserve water.
Yeah, it is. And the research found that smart purging can achieve similar risk reduction as scheduled purging, but uses way less water.
That's awesome. A win-win for both health and conservation. Okay, so flushing is good, but what about the overall risk levels? Did the research give us any good news?
Well, the good news is that for Legionnaire's disease, the average risk stayed below the benchmark in all scenarios.
Even without any purging?
Yep, even without purging.
Yeah.
However, when they looked at the risk for the milder infection, Pontiac fever, the benchmark was exceeded in all scenarios.
So we're probably all getting exposed to Legionella more often than we realize, but not necessarily getting seriously ill.
Yeah, that's the takeaway here. But there's another important thing to consider.
What's that?
The average risk doesn't tell the whole story for people with weaker immune systems. Even a small exposure could be dangerous.
Oh, right. So this is especially concerning for like elderly people or folks with underlying health conditions.
Exactly. They use this metric called dailies, which measures the overall burden of disease.
Okay.
And they found that even in the best case scenarios, the benchmark was exceeded for some individuals.
So we still need to be vigilant, especially when it comes to protecting those who are more vulnerable to this bacteria.
Absolutely. And you know what else is important to think about?
Whoa.
What happens before the water even reaches our homes?
Oh, yeah, like the whole water treatment and distribution system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle, and that's what we'll be discussing in part 2 of this deep dive.
All right, looking forward to it. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after the break.
You know, it's like we were just talking about all the stuff we can do in our own homes to minimize risk.
Right, like flushing our pipes and all that.
But it's important to remember that there's this whole other side of the story, like what happens before the water even gets to our houses.
Yeah, the water treatment and distribution system.
Exactly. So let's zoom out a bit and look at that bigger picture. Like, where does our water come from?
Well, it all starts at the water treatment plant, right?
Right. And their main job is to make sure the water that leaves their facility is clean and safe.
Which includes getting rid of any nasty bacteria like Legionella.
Exactly. So how do they do that?
Well, I know they use chlorine in swimming pools to kill germs, so maybe something similar.
You got it. Disinfection is the most common method, and chlorine is usually the go-to weapon.
Okay, so essentially they're just adding chlorine to the water to kill any Legionella that might be lurking in there.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And chloramine is also commonly used.
So does that mean our water is completely safe once it leaves the treatment plant?
Well, not so fast.
Let's stay.
Legionella is a tricky little bugger. Even if chlorine kills it in the water itself, it can still hide out in other places.
Like where?
In biofilms.
Biofilms, what are those?
They're these slimy layers that bacteria can form on the inside of pipes.
So they're like little safe havens where Legionella can wait out the chlorine attack.
Exactly, and that's why water treatment plants have to be proactive about targeting these biofilms.
So how do they do that?
Well, they can flush the pipes with higher concentrations of chlorine or use alternative disinfectants like ozone or UV light.
Oh, wow. So they have a whole arsenal of weapons to fight this bacteria.
They do, and sometimes they even have to physically clean the pipes to remove that buildup.
So it's a constant battle to keep those pipes clean and prevent bacteria from taking hold.
It really is, but let's say the water has successfully made it through the treatment plant and is now on its way to our homes.
Right, it's traveling through all those miles of pipes underground.
Exactly, that's the distribution system. And you know what's a big factor here?
I bet it's water age again.
You got the longer the water sits in those pipes, the more time Legionella has to grow, even if it started out clean.
So it's like a ticking time bomb.
Kinda, yeah. And that's why utilities have to be smart about managing that water age in their distribution systems.
So what do they do?
Well, they might optimize the layout of the pipes, adjust the flow rates, and even strategically flush certain sections to keep the water moving.
It's like they're playing a giant game of plumbing Tetris trying to keep everything flowing smoothly.
That's a great analogy, and all of this is happening behind the scenes before we even turn on our faucets.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about all the effort that goes into keeping our water safe. But it's not just about what happens underground, right?
Right. Building codes and regulations also play a big role.
So, like the rules about how plumbing systems are installed and maintained.
Exactly. Things like the types of materials used, backflow prevention devices,
Yeah.
water heater maintenance, all of that can help reduce the risk of contamination.
So it's a multi-layered approach we need to consider: the water treatment, the distribution system, and even how the buildings themselves are designed.
Exactly. And as awareness of Legionella risks grows, we're seeing more and more regulations specifically aimed at preventing outbreaks.
Like in hospitals and nursing homes where people are more vulnerable.
Exactly. Many healthcare facilities are now required to have water management plans, which include regular testing for Legionella and specific protocols for responding to positive results.
So it's like a whole new level of hygiene, but for our water systems.
It is, and all of this is happening alongside some incredible innovations in technology that are helping us detect, control, and even prevent Legionella contamination.
Okay, now you've got my attention. I love hearing about new solutions.
Well, on the detection side, we're seeing faster and more sensitive tests for Legionella. Some of these new tests can even give results in just a few hours.
Wow, that's amazing. The sooner, you have a problem, the sooner you can fix it.
Exactly. And for controlling the bacteria, there are new disinfectants that are even more effective against Legionella.
Even those sneaky biofilms.
Yeah. Some of these new disinfectants can actually penetrate those biofilms, and there are also new filtration technologies that can remove bacteria from water at the point of use.
So even if there's some contamination in the water system, these filters can act as a last line of defense.
Exactly. They're especially helpful in places with vulnerable populations like hospitals and nursing homes.
It's like a safety net for those who are most at risk. It sounds like we're making progress in this fight against Legionella. But what about prevention? Are there ways to stop it from growing in the first place?
That's the ultimate goal. And there are some really cool things being researched in this area, like antimicrobial materials in plumbing systems.
Antimicrobial materials, so we'd be building our pipes out of stuff that naturally repels bacteria.
Exactly. It's like building a fortress against Legionella from the ground up. And there's another interesting avenue of research involving probiotics.
Probiotics, you mean like the good bacteria that are supposed to be good for our gut health?
Yep, those same probiotics, researchers are looking at how we can use them to crowd out Legionella in our water systems.
So it's like introducing a bunch of friendly bacteria to fight off the bad guys.
Exactly. The idea is that these good bacteria will outcompete the harmful ones for resources and space.
I love it. It's like a microscopic turf war happening inside our pipes.
It's a fascinating approach,
Yeah.
and it has the potential to be a really effective prevention strategy.